Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to open the Central Vermont Regional Planning meeting for Tuesday, November 12th. And we'll go around the room, get to know everyone. Sue?
Sue Sinclair, Director.
Lori Emery, staff.
I'm Bob Warnick, Berlin.
Laura Eubanks, Northfield.
Faith Terry Silver, Marshfield.
Tina Ruth, Montpelier.
Tim Carver, East Montpelier.
Julie Potter, East Montpelier alternate.
Mike Miller, City of Barry.
Janice Shaney, Woodbury.
Let's go over to the back, over here. Ma'am?
I'm Sophie from the Whiskey Compilation District.
Ed Larson, Montpelier.
Paige McCrellis with Stone Environmental in Montpelier.
John Kiernan with Phelps Engineering in Middlebury. John DeSantos with Facilities Engineering at the State of Vermont.
Paul Olander with Utility Partners. We're a contract ops firm. We do Cabot, Marshfield, Danville, St. James.
Jean Vitzering, East Montpelier Planning Commission.
Ron Crowell, Middlesex.
Bob Morency with RCAP Solutions.
John Akaleshi with State of Vermont Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division.
Lynette Whitney with the Facilities Engineering Division, State of Vermont.
And our new arrival?
Greg Chamberlain, Town of Plainfield.
Thank you.
Gary Galka, Cabot Planning Commission.
Vince Ledoux, State of Vermont Facilities Engineering Division.
Rhonda Shippey, USDA Rural Development.
Gunnar McCain, Waterbury.
Stephanie Smith, staff. Kim McKee, staff.
Gary Winters, Washington.
Bob Atchison, Plainfield. Larry Hebert, Williamstown.
Brian Fitzgerald, Duxbury.
Rolf Muir, Callis.
Jackie Casino, staff.
Byron Atwood, Berrytown.
And Don LaHaye representing Waitsfield. Thank you all for being here. Got quite a turnout. It's good to see. Okay, want to do the accepting of the minutes for the October 8th meeting.
Do you need one?
What do you want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Anybody second that?
Second.
Any discussion?
One thing, we had discussed during the meeting the fact that the communities, rural Vermont communities were falling behind in the rate schedule issue with FEMA on flood insurance. And that didn't appear in the minutes. I don't expect everything that happens at the minutes to be appearing here, but I thought it was important. I thought there was a general consensus by the membership that it's something that the staff should get involved in, is assisting in this CRS, community rating systems.
So you wanted to say more than it was suggested, that the presentation given by Ned Swanberg on flood hazard in New Zealand.
Yeah, that was-
Community rating system would also be good. Schedule?
Yeah, in other words, I think the fact that we brought up the community rating system being an important issue was correct.
So my question is, you want that more than that
Yes,
sentence in
yeah,
there?
yeah, I read that, and that was sort of the conclusion of that process, but it was just a small part of it.
So, just by way of information, we are going to have that scheduled for next month's meeting.
Excellent. I noted that Berlin is struggling with that right now. He's trying to.
As
do a
are many
questionnaire.
communities, and it's going to be Rebecca Pfeiffer and not Ned, probably.
Yes, though I haven't finalized.
Did you want to say anything more, Kim?
Yeah, I was also just going to mention, there's been an uptick in interest across the state, and Rebecca Pfeiffer with A&R is also organizing a working group to explore RPC participation and support of towns in joining CRS. So that's going to be a regular conversation that we're hoping to kind of finalize, specifically the role we could play and what funding options are available to do that.
Excellent.
So you want to amend the minutes?
I'd like to amend the minutes to reflect that we talked about the need to get involved in the community rating, assisting communities in developing responses to community rating systems.
Okay, so we want to accept the minutes with that change.
I would accept the minutes with those changes.
Anyone else? Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes with the changes that Bob has recommended, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Staff reports. Sue?
Any questions on staff reports? We've had a lot going on. One thing I'd like to mention is congratulations to Kim for having taken and passed the CFM Certified Floodplain Manager exam. So congratulations to Kim. That was a big... We have our next zoning administrative roundtable coming up on December 4th. Guess that's all I really have to point out. Once again, unless there's any questions. There's a lot going on.
Sue, maybe you could tell us what's most important that's going on right now. Please.
Well, certainly the regional plan update has been taking a lot of focusing on our attention. We've also been, as I've reported at the executive committee as well as here, we're administering the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds, and we're working with 5 towns: Berry City, Plainfield, Cabot, Northfield, fifth one, I said Berry City. Marshfield, with some projects that are going forward, so, and then, of course, our work with Waterbury on the flood inundation study.
Yep.
That we're working on, as well as hazard mitigation planning. And Kim, you want to give a quick update on that? Because I think we're almost there.
Sure, yeah, we're close to bringing all towns in line with fully approved hazard mitigation plans. There's kind of 4 towns awaiting final approval. And with those valid plans, towns are eligible for the hazard mitigation grant program, which a deadline is coming up for the 6th round of funding. This is going towards projects, so elevations, home buyouts, floodproofing projects, and we've been working with a number of towns and applicants to try to pull them together. So it's kind of a short deadline, but there will be others down the line. So trying to take advantage of that funding to plan for flood resiliency.
And then getting back to the regional plan for a minute, well, you'll be hearing more about that in a few minutes, but through Stephanie, Kim's, and Jackie's good work, next week we're having students from the Berry Tech Center come to our office to present the final logo design for the regional plan update, the final 3. Stephanie, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so we've been partnering with a class at Berry Technical Center, and they've been designing a logo. Kim and I went in last week to critique individually each of the students and look at their logos and how it might better reflect what we're doing. And then, so we're going to get their final drafts tomorrow, and then pick the top 3, and those students are going to come in and present next week. So it's very exciting. It's been a lot of fun.
And then the work with, if you could talk just briefly about the work with the Spalding students and the Harwood students.
Sure, yep. The Spalding students, student-led community interviews, the videos have just come in to us, so we're just getting a first look at them. They've interviewed a broad range of community members, diverse age groups, folks from different towns throughout the region, asking them what they value about living here, how long they've lived here, what changes they've seen, how they felt about these changes. We're seeing a lot of responses focused on the economy and how the nature of their work's changed, where their parents worked. They've all emphasized a strong sense of community as what they value the most. That's been the strongest thread we've seen so far. We're hoping to, summarize and compile those videos into a mashup that we can hopefully use to present at public meetings this coming spring. And we also are working with 5 sections of a creating sustainable community class at Harwood High School, doing a similar project that will also be getting us some videos back that we'll be featuring on the website and at meetings. So students, there's been a lot of value in the students both talking to these community members about these issues and getting the feedback to us also. So it's been going well, and we'll have to have something to show you all pretty soon.
And then last and not least, the crowdsourcing and the website update.
Right, so we have a crowdsource map that's almost finalized. We're just waiting to get the logo and get the branding information updated, and then that's the last thing to be updated, so the map will be finished. But then we're hoping to launch the website in the end of December or to early January. And then we're going to have a few public meetings in the spring, and then we'll launch the map after those, so we can have some information on the map before we launch it. But the map is almost set to go, so just getting the website designed at this point.
So a lot going on.
Thank you, Sue.
Okay, review and accept the schedule for the updating of the regional plan. Kim, are you handling that?
Jackie is.
Jackie? Oh.
Sure. Yeah, so within your packet that Laura sent out last week, there was a copy that is a working draft, so we expect there to be changes as the plan really gets underway. But you can refer to it now in your packet if you'd like, but it's just the general plan for when the working groups will be meeting, what that time frame is, what they'll be looking at within each section, the regional plan draft review committee, when and how they would be meeting, and then lastly at the very end, there's some areas that were identified as deficient in the last plan, and just for reference. That's probably it broadly, but if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask. This is part of our contract this year with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development in terms of looking at a general plan for how we would address areas where we were deficient with our last regional plan. And I guess just my 2 cents, is important to keep in mind that, that plan was in 2008, so statutory changes have occurred, so that's something to keep in mind, and we would be looking at those new requirements anyway. This just sort of gives us the Cliff's Notes version, so it was helpful in that case.
Okay, any questions on the draft review?
Is this plan a sufficient detail to satisfy our contract obligations with the state?
I believe it is, yes. They will let us know if it's not, I'm sure. But
this is sort of the format that other regional planning commissions have been using across the state, so I'm sure I would expect some feedback from ABCCD, but I think until we turn it in, just at least all giving them a similar format to go off of.
Any other questions on the plan schedule? Okay.
Need a motion to approve that?
yes, we do.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion.
Second? Who second? Tina? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Now, we're looking at appointing committee members for the Regional Plan Draft Review Committee. And we do have a list of prospective committee members. Okay, Mike Miller, City of Barry, Tim Carver, East Montpelier, Laura Hill Eubanks from Northfield, David Strong, who is not here this evening, and Dara Torrey from Moortown. I didn't see Dara come in, is she in?
Yes, she came in.
Oh, okay. So that's who we have on there now, so we'll get approval.
Well, 5 commissioners and then organizational representatives.
Sure.
Jackie, you want to?
Yeah, so I have some additional information about some of the newer folks that perhaps aren't on the commission right now, and then Dara, just because she's also new to the commission. So there's some supplemental information. Feel free if you're interested. It's just bios. If you would like to take a copy, please do so. If not, feel free to just pass it down. Sorry. So yeah, just a refresher. What we're looking at tonight is the regional plan review committee, and they're tasked with reviewing, making recommendations on amendments to the regional plan that's going to be submitted to this commission for final review and ultimately final approval. That committee is also charged with developing a guiding vision statement in coordination with the public input that we will be getting throughout this process. We've proposed that it be structured of 9 members total, 5 commission members and 4 community and or organizational members. Trying to think, make sure I'm hitting the highlights. This is a group that will be meeting throughout the next 2 years, whereas the working groups will be meeting for a few months at a time to specifically discuss their particular topics. This group will take the work that they do, clean it up, get input from you all and amongst themselves, and submit a final draft to you all. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. But if you have any questions, we do have the organizational reps here tonight, so if you have any questions for them, this would be a great time to ask them, or if you have any structural questions for me, feel free to ask.
So we're going to approval of this.
We don't have any information on Scott Dascom.
We don't. He is, he's worked with Steve Latchek, and those of you that are on the TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee, probably know him. He has been assigned to us. He's our planning coordinator from V-Trans, but I don't have any additional information on him right now.
Scott here would like to say anything.
Who?
Scott here.
Is he here?
He's not here.
No,
he's not
Scott's a
here.
resident of the city of Barry. He's served on the Transportation Advisory Committee for as long as I can remember, and I think I've been there from the beginning. He's a planner. He's worked on transportation planning for rail, public transportation. I think he's a good addition to the group.
Okay.
Recommend him.
All right, so,
We're looking for 9.
9, correct.
and that'll fill the
There it is.
whole list of what we need, right?
Yes.
I make the motion that we accept the recommendations of people who have volunteered. I'm not sure how they got on this list. We welcome them. Laura did not step back fast enough, apparently.
Yeah.
So I make the motion to accept this slate.
Okay, anybody care to second Bob's motion?
I second.
Okay. Byron? Any discussion? Any further discussion? Any questions about the individuals?
I'm assuming that anybody that wants to participate in these meetings are going to be public meetings. They'll be well noticed, so discussions on the views and so forth will be anybody who wants, and I presume there will be more than one.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to mention on that note, we'll have a meetings and events calendar on the plan website, and I think we're going to plan at the beginning of each month to email out to all the commissioners the upcoming committee meetings and working groups that we plan, so folks can have that on the radar.
Excellent.
Is the plan website tied into the newsletter website?
It will be. It's going to be launched at a new...
So that's how we'll be able to find it? Through the newsletter or
Yes.
And through our regular website.
regular website? Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You guys have it. Okay.
What you asked for, right? That's right, Eric.
That's why it's so quick to nothing.
Yeah. Don't run out on us, Ed.
You got me for 3 years now, then, Mr. Chairman.
There you go. Good to have you, Ed. Okay, presentation by the staff, Agency of Natural Resources and USDA Rural Development on creative wastewater treatment solutions and funding options.
The map went away, but as we mentioned, of course, as a important part of our Plan Central Vermont process, we'll be convening a working group and addressing the utilities, facilities, and community services element, of which municipal wastewater solutions will be a key component. Many municipalities are kind of grappling with issues of the need for wastewater treatment to support growth in existing settlements and growth areas, issues with failing systems, aging systems, and we were excited that Lynette Whitney from DEC was able to put together this awesome panel of folks from Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation and USDA Rural Development to talk about options for technical assistance and financial assistance in addressing this issue. So without further ado.
So our last speakers just kind of got in, so Josh, if you want to join us up here.
I'm here. Good to see you.
You have a seat. Josh, you have a seat there.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it, gentlemen. Yeah, I think my left is not... Late? I was told 7:30.
Hi, my name is Lynette Whitney. You may recognize me. I was a commissioner from Berry City a number of years ago, and I was approached by CVRPC about doing a presentation on wastewater solutions. At the same time, ACCD had asked ANR, what can we do to help villages get through the stepping stones that they need to get through to get to where they need to get to have wastewater solutions. So with this presentation, I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone, if you will. So this presentation is both a roadmap for the Clean Water SRF program, which is my job. It's primarily a loan program. And then it's also part of a wastewater toolkit for getting projects started out through different communities. The presentation is broken into two parts. There's a technical part, and the technical speakers are over here. We have Bernie Christensen, John Eikelijek, and Robert Morency. And then we have the the financial presenters over here. We have Josh Hanford from ACCD, Winslow Ledoux from FED, and Rhonda Shippey from USDA. Okay, so when I started in the Clean Water SRF program and I was learning about my job, we had steps 1 through 3 in Roman numerals, and we noticed that some people were having a problem getting to step 1, so we added step 0 and we added step 4. So it's a 5-step program, 0 through 4. So as we talk about this, hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, so step 0 is defining what your problem is. Step 1 is the planning portion of the project. Step 2 is design. Step 3 is construction. And step 4 is repayment and auditing. So in step 0, we have the project definition. Your town might have any sort of wastewater need. You might have orders from the agency to fix problems. You might have failed systems. You might have poor water quality, contaminated water. You might not have any way to expand your village for growth or development. And you may not be able to afford any sort of project at all. So who can help? Well, we can help. At Facilities Engineering Division, that's my job, is getting projects started through project development. I can sit down with you, help you figure out what your scope of service is, help you find a consultant, and you can fill out a loan application through Winslow. There's also, if maybe you're not comfortable coming to the government for help, there's also RCAP Solutions, which is Robert Morency. Robert does the same type of work through a nonprofit group. He's based out of New Hampshire, and he does work for both New Hampshire and Vermont. So it's a little bit more limited. At A&R we have 2 staff for this. So we can help you find the right consultant through an RFP or an RFQ process. Your town staff can help you if you have town staff. Your regional engineer at A&R can help you. Regional engineers all work for Ernie. And then other funding agencies can also help you get started out. So if you don't have any sewer infrastructure, there's a certain level of stepping up that needs to happen, because if you don't start a sewer committee, your project doesn't really get traction in your community. So you need a sewer committee or a sewer commission with active, dedicated volunteers. In the program, we frequently call them the spark plug. You also need help from your planning commission, because your project for any sewered area, in order to qualify under the Clean Water SRF program, needs to be part of your town plan in an area that you're planning to have sewered. Frequently, these need to be growth centers, but they can also be neighborhoods that you want to sewer, or there's a number of different ways to plan for them. And if you have questions about the statute, it's best to talk to Winslow. You also need help from your select board, because they have to back you up when they are with the project, with getting your bond voting out, with signing your loan applications, and if your select board's not behind you, your project isn't going to go anywhere. Ultimately, you need support from your community, because even if your select board is on board and your planning commission is on board, to be successful in the program, you need to pass a bond vote. Okay, so just to review, the project team includes your select board, state officials, planners, consultants, town staff, your sewer committee, and hopefully you. Okay, step 1, planning, is what can we do? Ultimately, the end product of a planning of your step 1 loan through our program will give you a preliminary engineering report. And a preliminary engineering report is an analysis of your alternatives. It's not just any old study. There's a number of federal requirements that are involved in the preliminary engineering report. And if you prepare your preliminary engineering report in a way that meets the requirements for the Clean Water SRF program, you're also eligible for funding through HUD and USDA, which is really excellent. And this is a change that's happened. There's a jointly accepted PER format from USDA, HUD, and EPA, and it's just a great thing for you guys and for me. Okay, so what are the alternatives? Well, I think you're all pretty familiar with wastewater treatment plants, at least in concept. But there's other alternatives out there too. You can have centralized systems where people share, or decentralized systems where people share with several homes on, this shows 14 homes on one septic system. This is a classic single-family home system. But you can also look at policy options and figure out if there's things that, what fits your community in terms of the alternatives. The alternatives also include best fix solutions. I don't know if, do you want to talk about best fix solutions?
Well, best fix solutions are really, you have a failed wastewater system. We have a set of rules. It's approximately 100 pages long. And the first goal is to meet the technical standards of the rules. If you can't meet the technical standards, then as long as this is an existing project where there is no increase in design flows, we can look at what's called best fix, or in the rules under section 806, it's called the variance section. Under the variance section, we start to look at what's preventing it from meeting the rules. Is it isolation distance to water supplies? Is it depth to groundwater, which is primarily the reason that people can't meet the rules, is depth to maintaining 3 feet or 18 inches to the groundwater table. So we start to evaluate with your designer how we can design a system on that property, and the final goal, quite honestly, is keep it below ground, so it's not surfacing anymore. And that's the basic steps. There's a lot that we need to look at with regard to protecting human health and the environment, but that the main goal at that point, if you can't meet any of the criteria, get the best system on that will stay below ground. And like I say, there's no growth to that type of a system.
Okay, so here's a graphic that explains the difference between centralized systems and decentralized systems. You start out, you have individual systems, and then shared systems, cluster systems, and larger clusters, and then small wastewater treatment plants and large wastewater treatment plants. Another alternative is the indirect discharge system, and that's with John's program.
Yeah, indirect discharges in terms of sewage systems are systems that are 6,500 gallons per day or more that discharge to streams via groundwater. So it's an indirect discharge, not a direct discharge. It's a discharge to groundwater, and then that groundwater hits a stream. And that was the whole purpose of the program, was to protect stream water quality. So if you have existing sewage disposal systems that have failed, that you would combine and put into an indirect system, we would consider that to be an existing indirect system, so that it would facilitate the fix. If you plan for growth, then it would be considered a new indirect discharge, and that's a whole other burden of environmental protection. So a new indirect discharge system can't cause water quality violations in the receiving stream, nor can it cause the biota, the stream organisms, to change significantly above and below the point of discharge. So with these systems, which are generally leach field systems but can be spray field systems, you can have a fix for systems in your town where you've got straight pipes or you've got failing systems. And there's various regulations that determine what level of proof you have to provide in terms of environmental protection for those systems. I'm not sure if that's understandable. Was that fine?
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. These are all subject to the new rules that are coming out that for discharge into streams. I mean, they are directly affected, right?
What you have is, you have water quality standards that would require you, before you can have a direct discharge to a stream, you have to look at whether or not there's alternatives such as an indirect discharge. So you're forced to go that route to say, yes, I can do an indirect discharge, and at that point you would have to look at whether or not it was unreasonable to require the town or municipality to go to that indirect because of expense. You know, it's like 5 times more expensive than a direct discharge. Direct discharges are tougher to come by these days because you have a lot of uses of streams at the present time which may be affected by a direct discharge of treated sewage.
But you still have the indirect discharge affects water quality.
That's that's correct. The indirect discharge.
They're looking at, I mean, they're looking at nitrogen and phosphorus levels going into our streams,
right,
very hard. They're looking for all the sources. This is one of the sources that
we have, and that's right. Indirect discharges have to meet very stringent in-stream requirements. For instance, you're allowed 1 part per billion increase of phosphorus above background, which is a very, very small, it's almost not detectable.
Right.
And then in terms of nitrogen, there's a nitrogen cap at 2 milligrams per liter in stream. So those are already handled, and soil-based systems can remove phosphorus very efficiently.
But they're trying to reduce that nitrogen limit. How is this going to be affected?
I think they're always looking at nitrogen, and depending on whether or not it's going to Long Island Sound or, there's different watersheds and where they're headed. The nitrogen is particularly a problem for systems that discharge to salt area, brackish areas. So the indirect discharge rules have those standards built into them. They're not changing.
All right.
Okay, so they should probably be able to meet any changes they make in the water quality standards, because they're more stringent right now than the water quality standards if you look at them.
Okay. But I'm looking forward, because every conference, every class that I've been to lately they're talking about going from that 2 down to a 0.2, and how we're going to meet it. And this is why I came tonight, because I'm trying to figure out, if you are addressing that part of the issue, because they're going from that 2 milligrams that
You're talking about nitrogen?
Nitrogen. They want to go to a 0.2.
Who's they now?
This is the EPA.
Oh.
Okay?
Okay.
So we're now talking about changing the playing field. And I want to, I'm curious to see how you project that.
Well, we haven't had any discussions. Our program's totally state-run, and we haven't had anybody come to us and say, start thinking about going to 0.2.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Can you give an example of a system, an indirect discharge system in Vermont, and how it's working?
Many.
Yeah, we've got about 180 systems in Vermont. The closest ones to you folks, we've got one in Warren, for instance, a 30,000 gallon per day system. There's one in Hyde Park that was an existing system at 50,000 gallons per day. Bristol has one for the downtown areas, 20,000 gallons per day. Both Warren and Bristol are able to expand the use of those systems because they meet the standards in the stream. Hyde Park system was grandfathered, so it didn't have to meet new standards, but it can't expand beyond the 50,000. So those are just 3 examples of municipal systems. We have schools, like Crossett Brook Middle School, for instance, has a system. There's a lot of schools out there, there's a lot of subdivisions. Mobile home parks, most of our recent systems have been fixes for mobile home parks, for instance. So, sure.
How is it constructed? Picking the right area and digging down, replacing the material that's there to facilitate
No.
cleaning it up as it moves towards the river?
Generally not. What you look for is a site that can accommodate a larger system. So it's a little tougher to find those sites, but when you do find one, like they found in Warren, for instance, it's a gold mine because it's basically 50, 80, 90 feet of sand deposit. So you need a pretty good sized parcel for that. We do have spray field systems which serve a lot of the ski areas in Vermont, for instance, but those are, up front there's a treatment facility that gets them down to fairly stringent limits, even more stringent than what we allow in direct discharges. And then they spray it goes through soils in the spray field, gets further polished before it hits the stream. So the important factors are a good disposal site with the hydrogeologic factors that enable you to apply a certain amount of volume and have it move towards the stream and not sit there and build up. And also that you have a receiving stream that's sizable that can assimilate what you do send to it. All right.
So to recap, that was Ernie Christensen and John Isaac from the Agency of Natural Resources.
Lynette, can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yep, sorry. Okay, so at the same time you're in your planning phase, it's important to think about complementary projects. Sometimes your wastewater solution might be a drinking water system. And while that might not make sense intuitively, the agency does a lot to protect drinking water sources, and by providing one common drinking water source, you can free up more land where there's good soils as one potential solution. There may not be a cost-effective solution for your community. And in that case, sometimes we recommend policy changes. Such as community pump-out programs or pretreatment. So, growth is a big issue in Vermont, and a lot of people blame it on the sewers. I'm not sure how fair that is, but to get a successful sewer project, you need to deal with growth in your planning phase. You need to have an up-to-date and RPC-approved town plan. You need to have written planned growth areas, either for a village, downtown neighborhood, or growth center. You need to have a sewer ordinance with defined boundaries. And if you need a pipe, and your pipe goes outside of your defined sewer boundary, you need to restrict access to that pipe outside of that boundary. You need to have a coordinated zoning ordinance if you have zoning in your town. You need to identify opportunities to reduce loading to the system, which may mean changes in how you handle stormwater. And you need to decide what works for your community. If, for example, in Waitsfield, they had a study done that recommended what they called a big pipe project, and it couldn't pass the bond vote. Waitsfield is now moving on to a decentralized solution, and they're nearly there, but not quite. But that's what they could get a bond vote for. They couldn't get a bond vote for a big pipe. So that's something you need to decide in your community. Really, what's the best solution for you? Okay, moving on, step 2. This is where you design your project. I see there's a lot of engineers here today. I don't know if you were once or formerly a wastewater engineer. Could you raise your hand, or scientist, or designer, or... Hooray! Okay. Kind of shy. Okay. So in the design process, your consultant's heavily involved in figuring out the technical aspects of the plan. They do that for you. You don't really have to figure that part out. But you do have to figure out your legal and planning issues. If there's a parcel that's really critical to your project, you need to figure out the political situation with that parcel, and you need to get that landowner on board with the project and have them sign easements for the project and whatever land transfer needs to happen. You also need to, in the design process, make sure you continue to talk about your project, because it helps to foster the bond vote when it happens. Okay, step 3 is construction. During construction, there's a lot of communication and re-education that needs to go along. Berry City just redid a lot of stuff downtown, and they did a great job with Front Porch Forum and making sure that everybody was up on the project and knew what was going on. And then once your project is done, people need to know what changes they might need to make in order to be successful with the new system. So if your town gets a new water system to solve your wastewater problem, they might still have a wastewater problem if they use too much water all of a sudden because there's lots. Okay, step 4 is repayment. This is all in the town. At this point, your consultant is done, and there's still a lot of work for you to do to get all your receipts together and make sure that you get them into the loan program and that we can do an audit. We also encourage you to do budgeting and asset management and to really maintain whatever your solution is in order to to keep your system running for the whole life of the project. Great. Next are the funding options. So Winslow's going to take over.
Passing the clicker.
This is
Thank you. So we have three of us to talk about funding options, and I'm going to give a brief overview of those available from the Department of Environmental Conservation at the Facilities Engineering Division. There we go. This is us. You'll find in your handout today a piece of paper that looks like this, and this contains a summary of the funding options we disperse, either grants and loans, what they're called, what's funded, who's eligible, sources of funds, and who to contact. The last part's most important, the who to contact, because I can't give you a detailed description of all the nuances of each funding source today, but I'll give you a broad overview of what their strengths and weaknesses are. For example, with this Clean Water SRF, this is has a very broad breadth of eligible projects that are pollution related, clean water. It also includes stormwater projects are eligible. We can fund loans for the planning and design at 0% interest with up to 5 years before you have to start repayment. So there's time to plan. There's a less economic burden on the community. It's a good deal. Also in clean water, our construction loans are attractive at 20 years and 2%. So those are some broad understandings. The drinking water SRF, as Lynette pointed out, there may be a drinking water solution to your wastewater problem. The drinking water SRF has more restrictions on what's eligible in general. It has potentially a better economic deal because their interest rates go from +3 to -3, and -3 interest means there's partial grant. You're right. There was a time when we administered what was called the state and tribal assisted STAG grants, which are essentially earmarks from Congress. And as you're probably all aware, they haven't been doing things like that recently. Whether or not it'll come back, I can't say. If I had to guess, I'd say yes, closer to the election. Planning advances are noteworthy because they're similar to the grants, the loans that we provide for planning and design work. However, they're designed just for communities that have no infrastructure. So if you don't have a rate base or a populace that's where you're currently collecting utility bills, this financial tool may be available. And it doesn't have to be paid back unless you build what you designed or what you evaluated, which problems you looked at. And so for some communities, this is a very attractive alternative when they're not really sure if there's a community system in play in the future. We have several of these planning advances that are 20 years old, and they're just starting their projects, and they're just beginning to pay them back. The downside is that we don't have a lot of money for planning advances. However, last year at the legislature, we learned that there was support. And so if we do have communities come forward, there's a high likelihood we can get funding for those communities. Also pending funding from Vermont legislature are state grants for combined sewer overflows, CSOs, which are most often funded at the grant level, 25% of the project cost. Phosphorus, which historically have been funded at the 100% level, last one Waterbury. Dry weather flows or straight pipes, we haven't seen many recently. Hopefully they're all taken care of by and large. And what not shown here, sludge and septic grants are also eligible pending legislative support. And finally, a brand new program in our organization called the On-Site Water and Wastewater Loan Program is intended for homeowners that live in their homes and aren't able to get a loan. They have to have one rejection from a qualified vendor. And there's other median household income, incomes less than 200% of state, and they have to be design financing. And we're trying to make that attractive financing well in the less than 3% probably.
Winslow?
Yeah.
Is that last bullet item, is that And I'm asking this question because it's close to my heart. We have a failed system at my house, and we were told that there's no funding yet in this loan program. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes and no. The yes is the money's there. The no is that we're in contract negotiation with the lending institution to partner to facilitate this, and we're very close to the end of that process.
Time frame? 6 months?
I'd say less than
A year?
3, less than 2, hopefully. Someone in our shop would say
Dead
less
of
than
winter.
1, but
Okay.
this is a slide that gives more details on the drinking water SRF, and if there are questions later on, perhaps we can come back to it. And with that, I'll hand it off to Rhonda.
Okay, I don't need to do this because I only have one slide, but thank you, everyone. It's nice to be back here. I sat around the table for a number of years, so it's nice to see some familiar faces. Unlike Winslow, I didn't get my handout, so in your pre-handout, so if you want a brochure on our program, that's there, if you can get it, or I'll... We are USDA Rural Development. We are a broad agency that serves small towns all across America, and we're within the United States Department of Agriculture. We do housing loans for first-time home buyers. We used to do farm loans, that's now Farm Service Agency. We do business loans, and we do community loans. And in that community loan portfolio are utilities, which includes water and wastewater. We only work in rural towns, which for this definition, this program is less than 10,000 or less population, which is still pretty much all of Vermont. That's the beauty of working in Vermont. For population, we use the latest decennial census, and whether you like or don't like growth, that didn't change a whole lot from 2000 to 2010, which is what we're using now. Unlike the EPA dollars that flow to the drinking water and clean water that are primarily loan dollars, unless they turn them into minus 3% and that it really is a grant. Our program is a loan grant combination generally. We look at a project, and I'll go back to what Lynette said briefly, or a little bit about your preliminary engineering report. That is so important. That's the meat of what you're going to do. You start with a problem, and believe me, if you don't have a pretty good big problem, you probably won't get very far towards building a sewer system, because you'll find out, as you will by the end of tonight, how difficult and how many steps you have to go through to build a wastewater system. And it's a lot of responsibility for a town, and you don't really want to take that on unless you clearly do have a pretty good problem. But anyhow, that preliminary engineering report will outline what the problem is and then what are the solutions. And that's so important. Winslow's planning advances are a fantastic resource for getting that funded at no initial upfront cost to the town. Rural Development also provides funding for RCAP Solutions. Bob Morency stood up, and that's technical assistance that we provide through RCAP to small towns that are in these very beginning phases. You don't have a system, you've got a problem, you're trying to figure it out. He can go in and help work with you to hire an engineer to get that preliminary engineering done. So back to how we ultimately help you with the funding. Once you've identified that project, we then look at it and say, okay, you've got this many users. And in a new system, one of the big things that you have to do is make sure that if you build it, they will come. Because the last thing you want to do is lay water or sewer lines down some streets and nobody hooks on, because you still got to pay me at the end of the day when I make you a loan. So along with the bond vote and getting the authority for your town or your district to borrow the money, you got to make sure you've got people that are hooking on and going to pay that monthly or quarterly or annual bill. But that's how we decide whether you would get a loan or a grant, or more likely some combination from us. We look at the total project costs and we say, well, you've got X number of users and you have this much for O&M, and we try to keep your total user cost in the $500 to $600 a year range. Now, I will say, that's what a typical existing water and wastewater system user pays in Vermont. To build a new system and keep your costs equal to that is really very tough, unless you can get some of those STAG grants that that Winslow talked about. I think the last system that we funded that was a brand-new wastewater system was Cabot, which we, fortunately, they had some former UDAG monies kicking around that they could revolve and help build it, but that was what we consider one of our real successful brand-new startup systems that, of course, it's now probably 15 years old. But that's a great example, and if you're looking for somebody to talk to, I would highly recommend Cabot as an example. So we look at the project and we say, okay, this is what you can afford for a loan, and that's what we provide for a loan, and we try to provide a grant for the rest so that your user rates stay reasonable. Now that said, in order to even qualify for a grant, your community has to have a median household income that's less than the statewide average, which, you know, we have a list of every town in the state, and you can look and see if you qualify. If you don't, there's a possibility that we can do an income survey for the service area, and very often the village service, the village area, which is where your septic problems are and where your new system would be located, the median incomes in that part of your town are often lower than the town-wide income. So oftentimes those surveys work, yeah.
What was the numbers again for user costs?
The $500 to $600 range is what we see for an annual cost for water or wastewater.
Per unit?
Not both.
No, each.
Each. Which I still think is a great buy as someone who has a well and a septic system. Our interest rates that we offer, we have a 3-tiered rate based on the median income of your community. The lowest rate ranges around 2.75%, and the highest is right now around 4.5%. And then there's one that's in between. Our loans go up to 30 years for wastewater and 40 years for water. And as Lynette says, we work with you for the, until your loan is paid off. We're reviewing your financials, and we actually also fund the Rural Water Association, that if you have operational problems down the road, we pay for circuit riders that can help go out and help you with your operational issues. So we're kind of an agency that cares a lot about small towns, and when we work with you on a project, we stick with you until you pay us off 30 or 40 years later. Any rural development questions? I will, Lynette mentioned that oftentimes your wastewater solution is a water system. Waitsfield, she mentioned it, they built a water system, which we funded, and that's an example of that, although I guess they are now moving forward with a different kind of wastewater system too. But the water system got them some breathing room, and it's allowing that village to grow and do things that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to.
Does that mean that they qualified at the MHI below the statewide?
They did. The village. They did an income survey of the village. Yes.
Of the village itself.
Yep. And they got a stag grant too. Right?
Three of them.
Okay. I can go forward. Upper right.
You have to point it
Point
at the...
Point it at that. There we go, Josh.
Thank you.
I'm Josh Hanford, Director of the Vermont Community Development Program. And this is a federally funded program that is operated through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. It's funding from HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it's not a sewer water funding program, it's a community development funding program, everything from affordable housing, assistance to businesses to grow, create jobs, homeless shelters, planning, all the whole gamut. And so when it comes to sewer water projects, there is a role for this money, but it's really as a gap funder, a gap financing. When you've gone through the process of deciding what you need, determining that it's not just the big pipe, that you've gone through all the analysis and determined here's what you need. You've looked at the financing. You've gone to the standalone grants and loans for sewer and water, and you've maxed those out. And if there's still a gap, or if there's a gap of financing beyond what's reasonable for the community to pay, then this source becomes an option. We've done sewer and water projects occasionally throughout the state. We're part of the big financing in Pownell, the big new $23 million system that was down there. We've done some extensions. There's one right now just completing in Randolph. We were on a different side of the Waitsfield. We were funding the mobile home park that needed to be hooked up to that system, so it was directly to that area, but still made the town of Waitsfield's financing better. And these come as a grant. So the community is the applicant for these funds. And this funding is available throughout the year. It's an annual allocation. It's pretty dependable, but it ranges from Congress from $6 to $9 million a year, depending on what's going on out there in that lovely place of DC. But the key to this program is, in order for us to fund sewer and water, there's got to be a direct benefit to low to moderate income people. Some way. Either it's through an area-wide population statistics that show that community is considered low to moderate income based on the census figures, or there is a direct, this sewer or water connection is going to connect to a business that's going to be able to prove they're going to expand and offer jobs to low to moderate income people, or it's going to connect to housing where there's proof that low to moderate income people live, or as Rhonda said, there could be some surveys of certain areas of a community, the village or a mobile home park or some area that you can prove that by connecting sewer and water to this area, the majority of people benefiting will be low to moderate income through income surveys. So that sometimes can be challenging if it's just a straight, we need to add, a system or expand a system, and it's not connecting to any one of those areas where we can prove that low to moderate income people are benefiting. But with how these projects are so expensive, and if you're going to have a gap, a grant could really make it work. And so, I don't have a handout on sewer and loan programs because it's the entire program, but this website here, which is in the bottom of the handout, gives an overview of the program. It has our staff contacts. We have staff for different regions. Most all of this region would contact Carl Bolin, who's the community development specialist for Washington County, Lamoille County, Orange County. So yeah, most of Central Vermont region. This is a federal program, so it comes with compliance and regulatory issues that often do have an impact on the project, but any of these large funding sources would have environmental reviews that need to be done. Depending on who the funding source is, there's certain wage rates that need to be paid to all the folks working on the project. And then this is not fast money. It's slow money that comes, from the feds to the state to the community after a long process to get there. So it's not something that usually fits if it's you're in a rush panic situation. It's kind of got to be planned for, that you've got a gap and you've been working towards it to fill it for a year, and okay, this is the best solution now to pursue. So just want to make that clear, that it's definitely not something that comes to the rescue in short order. And it's a competitive grant process. We have more applications than funding that's available. So, working with us throughout the process and making sure you've tried to access all the funding that's directly allocated for sewer and water projects will be key. Working on those low to moderate income beneficiaries and showing that you can serve folks is key. And then working with us on when's the right time to come in for the funding. Is there a certain time of year that we might have more funding than another? we kind of have a sense of the applications that are rolling in. And like I said, this is not just, this could be for new systems, this can be for extensions, this can be for alternative systems. There is even an option of some planning funds, if the planning funds that are available aren't sufficient. You know, maybe there's some other further analysis that needs to be done for different alternatives or different ways of looking at the problem. As long as there's a potential for the solution to serve low to moderate income people, some planning funds are available. RPCs are key in many of these projects, accessing the CDBG dollars. You know, many small towns with limited staff need someone to help them with the application process and to get through the rules and regulations. So we're definitely non-technical. You'd have to show us what you're planning on doing and have, you know, engineers say, yep, that's the right solution, because we're not going to evaluate that side of things. We're going to evaluate this from the perspective of our fund, or HUD, which is, are you serving low to moderate income people? How many people are benefiting? Is it cost effective? And those sort of issues. So working with everyone else first and figuring if you're going to have a gap in financing, and if, you know, a grant can play a role in making the whole project successful, is kind of when we come into play. I guess maybe the question is grant sizes. It can be up to $1 million if it's you can prove that you're serving low to moderate income people via housing or jobs. So it can be a large chunk of funding. Any questions? Yes.
Money's tight in Washington. Is it slowing you down with what you can do, or?
Well, what's interesting is the disaster funding, we received a whole slug, $40 million of disaster funding compared to the $7 million we normally get. And there's a lot of projects that are able to be addressed with those funding. In fact, there is a sewer project in West Windsor that we're gearing towards disaster funding, because they don't have any sewer in the village, and the now closed Ascutney ski area does, and if they can connect it, they can serve the village, because the village can't, you know, there's no businesses can expand, no bedrooms can be added, and then that is connected to the town of Windsor. So, but their fire department, school, and all those on-site septics were all damaged from Irene. So the regular funding is tighter, but we have other money that we can adjust flexibly. So we haven't seen, I guess, a real impact to our core CDBG dollars. Well, this is ACC municipal planning grant. So there's no one here from this side of our shop. Let's just see if I can figure this out. So these are state dollars. This is really the state planning, community revitalization and planning department. And they have some small grants for communities. Many folks here are probably familiar with the municipal planning grant program. A lot of those funding goes to help towns with their updating their town plans and taking on special projects. But it can also be used to assist with sewer, water, especially if it's a alternative type of project. Investigate some of that, provide some more funding for planning. It needs to be clearly articulated in the town plan, and jive with that, with the goals. And really, it's meant to support dense, smart growth development in village downtowns. The core denser areas of our communities. And like anything, you'd want to talk to the municipal planning grant staff before you assume that this is a right fit, and they have an annual allocation from the legislature that gets tweaked a little bit up and down, so they know what their schedule looks like. And the key person, this is the website that lists all staff, but really the key person to talk to here is Faith Inglesrud. She would be kind of the keeper of the knowledge on this municipal planning grant program. Yeah.
And last but not least, Vermont Municipal Bond Bank provides low-interest loans to municipalities through their bond sales. Numbers are in the 4 to 5 range. We just learned a little bit about some flood mitigation. Department of Public Safety has others. Efficiency Vermont has provided grants to wastewater and water supply projects where energy-saving components are involved, usually as pump replacements of that nature. Also, there's been some contributions to some cogeneration projects at wastewater plants. And lastly, the Vermont Ecosystem Restoration Program provides grants for a non-point source, so where this may come into play more is in the green infrastructure for stormwater projects.
What about NeighborWorks? NeighborWorks.
Ernie has another one.
Ernie's got another one. NeighborWorks is a...
Yeah, are you familiar with NeighborWorks? NeighborWorks is a lending program that deals with really the low end, the poverty level for replacing of failed wastewater systems. When we developed, we didn't, Don Rubisky developed the low-income loan program that started up in 2011, 2012. Our loan program was to fill the gap between NeighborWorks and those who could get loans through banks. So if you know somebody who has poverty level income with a failed system, they may qualify for the NeighborWorks. And I think there's 5 offices.
Yeah, I can talk about it. That's a CDBG funded program. So in Central Vermont, it's the Central Vermont Community Land Trust. They operate those funds, and so it is for low to moderate income homeowners that have a failed system or need a new system, water or sewer, along with any other home safety, life safety, energy efficiency repairs, but they can't get financing through a bank. So they have very low interest loans, and in some cases grants to assist those homeowners with. So the regional land trust offices, there's 5 of them. In this region, it's Central Vermont Community Land Trust in Barry that would have access to the NeighborWorks money and the CDBG money that does that.
I'll just say Rural Development's housing program has a very similar program for low income, for health and sanitary, which can be a wastewater system replacement. For elderly people, it is a grant, and for non-elderly low-income people, it's a long-term, I believe, 1% loan. So our office right in Montpelier handles that for all but the southern 4 counties.
So, how do we get started? We recommend that we get select boards behind a local committee, identify problems, meet with our office. Contacts is Lynette on the planning side, myself on the funding side for FED, although there are other funding sources to learn about tonight. And secure your funding for planning. This is my email. Here are the contacts for the others. It's in your handout. Are there any other general questions today?
I have a comment.
Sure.
So you'd asked about the TMDL, and I apologize for not having a slide on phosphorus and nitrogen and the probable imminent need to do wastewater plant upgrades to handle phosphorus and nitrogen. Those upgrades definitely qualify in the Clean Water SRF program. They have the same step 1, step 2, step 3 process that we described here. Your step 0 is pretty much taken care of because you know what your problem is. You just need to get going and get a consultant, and we can help you with that if you need help getting geared up. But
I think it's also worthy to point out on that issue that the conversation's ongoing as to what the final target standards will be. And so
And that makes it hard. I mean,
it makes it more difficult.
Well, I mean, here we are. I work in a community that's small, and the past performance has been that they have not put aside sufficient funds for these big projects.
Sure.
And now, I mean, everybody's on board and trying to put some money aside so that they can be ready. But
excellent idea.
The problem being is we don't know what the target is. I mean, here we are, we're trying to put together a plan for 15 years from now when we do have to replace this plant, and we don't even know what we're shooting for. You know.
Well, those targets should be clear well before those 15 years are up.
They'll change 5 times before that.
Well, I can't say they won't, but I can say that they're at least with, I don't know which watershed your plant is in. Winooski. So my primary target will be the Lake Champlain TMDL.
Right.
And as you probably heard, there'll be public hearings on that in the next month or so.
Right.
And following that, there'll be a process to set the TMDL. Then there'll be a wastewater allocation process and then there'll be final permits will be issued. And all those steps will take time. Brian's closer to this than I am, maybe, but maybe not. Anyways, in general, there's a number of steps that have to be gone through.
Right.
But I applaud your town's or municipalities' efforts to begin to start saving for these before the, as the gentleman over here mentioned, times are tough in Washington. We're seeing the state SRF program amounts being reduced most years. And when it was originally created, it was meant to be capitalized for a period of time to grow amount of money that would then revolve, as this name implies. Some think that we're near that point, although nationally there's a lot of debate about that. But even if we were to stop in the next 5 years, in Vermont we're only circulating now about 8 million a year. And we have far more than that in projects every year that come across our door. And with the treatment that you and I see coming down the pike for places like Lake Champlain watershed, as well as the Connecticut River.
It's very insufficient. It's very insufficient.
It's going to be a challenge.
Right.
And so it's necessary for communities to share the cost and begin to save as well, because that'll stretch the federal dollars further. Any other comments or questions?
Can you give a kind of a ballpark figure on what a preliminary engineering report might cost?
It really depends on what the scope of the project is. We have projects that are as small as $100,000 for the total project, including the preliminary engineering report, and projects as big as $30 million.
Preliminary engineering, the smallest ones I've seen are less than 10,000, and they may go well north of 50, maybe north of 100 on the largest project. But
okay, thank you.
well, the smaller communities, the 10 to 30 to 50 range will get you a long ways along.
Smaller community being below 10,000?
Well, a lot has to do with geography and what sort of solutions you're looking at. Once you start evaluating soils, those prices will go up if you're looking at indirect, so it depends on what direction you're headed. Each project's unique. Other comments or questions? Yeah.
If the community had a plan done maybe, 10 years ago, is there funding to look for an upgrade on, or see if there's other, look at the plan today versus what might have been 10 years ago?
Simply stated, yes. And the funding sources, it'd be interesting to learn how that was originally funded, because that may affect how it's funded again. If it was a planning advance, it may be that it would be a candidate for a planning advance again, which would be your best deal. If not, if it was an SRF loan, then a loan is always available. Planning loans are available any time of the year by any community from our office. Construction loans work on an annual cycle.
Okay, it's a hard question. What can you do to simplify the process?
What we can do to simplify it is to work with you closely and answer every question that comes up. Because the feds have given us a process that has lots of components. And the best way to go through it is slowly and carefully. We can be of help, and you pick an engineer that you're comfortable working with.
Right.
I was going to say that your engineer does a lot of this in conjunction with you.
We're in the middle of a water project, or in the beginning of a water project, and he called me today and asked me some questions that I really didn't expect, but I mean, it was good. But this is just the beginning. And here I am. I've never done one of these before, and it's all information. But it sounds like it's going to become a lot longer than I expected, because I thought we'd already answered the questions, and no, we haven't. We've got a lot more.
So one of the resources we have that you can ask me a copy for if you're interested is published by RCAP Solutions. It's a guide called Getting Your Project to Flow Smoothly. It's available on the internet as a PDF, and I have a couple hard copies in the office if you need a hard copy. But this is a book that explains in detail all of these steps and how to really get your project to work, so that you can anticipate maybe some of your engineer's questions, and so that you really have a handle on what to expect.
Are there any more questions? Anyone?
There was one over there.
Someone have a question?
Yeah, just a comment about another potential issue or problem. Once you have your project built, is affordability of user fees. And I wish there were something we could do about that with, income sensitivity and the user fees that are paid in small villages like them in Cabot. And, our user fees are extremely high for village water and sewer. And the affordability is, for people living in the village, it's a real hardship once you have your system built. Is there anything that we can do about that?
Well, if for existing systems, if you have a large debt component to your fees, refinancing may be an option. Our program isn't in that business primarily, but there may be other refinancing options. It's interesting you should mention that, because the existing Clean Water SRF program, where, as I mentioned, a good deal, 2%, 20 years, it sounds like attractive funds, it doesn't have an income sensitivity to it. In fact, in this year's intended use plan, this is the first time I said it in public, we'll be asking people if we should put that in our Clean Water SRF program. And I expect the answer will be yes, and so they'll be required to determine what the terms will be and ask for the legislature to support the issue and make any necessary changes. But we're likely to do that. We're going to talk about it this winter, maybe the following year, pursue the changes to make that. But that may not address your issue for existing facilities.
And oftentimes, like in Cabot, where is the plant 10 years old now? It's the operational costs that keep rising, more so than the debt service. At least the debt service is fixed, but those operational costs with additional testing and additional requirements that have come on over the years.
Right, and that's going to continue, and that's not factored into any of this.
Well, it is considered in the income sensitivity program when looking at what, in our drinking water program, for example, what the interest rate should be, and in the SDA program, whether or not you're eligible for a grant.
Right.
So we do take operational costs into considerations.
But they changed.
The change part is more difficult to forecast.
Right.
The CDBG funding that can be structured that way to meet that low and moderate income benefit. You could say we want $400,000 over this period, and it's just going to be used to subsidize the user connection fees or user fees for people that meet this low moderate income definition, and that could be one way the funding could go into a project to meet the low moderate income benefit. Now, it's already in place and you've got ongoing user fees now. That's something I'm not familiar with, if that's ever been done. You know, you could sign on later, hey, help us pay our user fees now that we have it in place. I could look into that. We haven't been approached with that question directly before, so. But I know up front you can design the CDBG funding to subsidize the lower income users because the fee is going to be a burden.
I don't know, some of the planning, getting the early planning steps, I don't know the details about Cabot, but I know if you spend the money to design a system that's larger and then you never fill that capacity, you're going to have, 300 homes trying to pay for a system designed for 600 homes because you didn't either adjust your zoning to accommodate, you didn't have the development pressure to accommodate, so everybody's paying, it's always you look at it for roads between Vermont and New Hampshire, same amount of roads in the two states, they have twice the number of population. So they have twice the number of people to pay for maintaining the same amount of roads that Vermont does. Same thing with a system. If you have a half a system, everybody's going to pay twice the amount. And sometimes the key to getting your costs down is to find out what is the barrier to getting more hookups within that system. Can you increase the density? Can you get economic development? Can you get an economic developer to try getting commercial development in, which will help to pay a greater portion?
Good point.
Got another question over here.
I'm from the village of Plainfield, and one of the things that happens there is that, we've identified that when you get to 75% capacity of your system, that's time to start scrambling to upgrade or build a new one. The other hat I wear is energy coordinator, and that said, I'm a landlord of a home in the village where we work with Efficiency Vermont to put in all water-saving devices, et cetera, but we still get hammered at the same rate that everybody else does, paying by the unit. So, it seems that if I work very creatively to get everybody in the village to save water, and we know that wastewater is geared to water, there's no water meter for the outflow, So aside from washing cars and watering gardens, what goes in comes out in terms of water. And, it just seems like creatively, if we, just like any other fixed commodity, if we have a certain amount of water, then we should be conserving it as much as we can. And in doing so, then we reduce the capacity of what we have to build. It's conceivable that we could reduce the water needs of the community enough that we wouldn't have to upgrade the plant, unless the machinery breaks down. I work with Efficiency Vermont, and he has the plant operators over here work with him to try to do a pump program. So we're also reducing the consumption of electricity. But it seems like that's a more, instead of throwing money at the dream big pipe or whatever you want to call it in the sky, that you should be working creatively, because water is going to start to be an issue too. We just can't keep thinking that that's an endless commodity. And the other thing is Waitsfield or Cabot or whatever, you have a certain number of users that are in the village, and the rest of the community antes up to pay for the whole thing. Whether it's probably less, I don't know, I'm paying a lot less for an individual system on my own property than I am per year for the capacity of the, even if you include the building of the system and give it a 20-year appreciation, it's still much more economical for the individual system than what we're paying for 5 units in the village. So, there seems to be a...
Ron is mentioning water meters and the importance that they are for use as a billing mechanism, as well as keeping track of usage as a way to encourage efficiency. Remember, your water or sewer bill has multiple components. Two important ones are infrastructure cost and operation and maintenance. Now, true, when you reduce the amount of water used, your operation and maintenance costs may decrease some, but you still have to pay the infrastructure. So even if you decrease the amount of water used, there's the infrastructure cost needs to be paid. I just saw a talk last week where on a national scale, major utilities are seeing declining water usages across the country. And costs are continuing to go up, which means rates are going up. And it's a dilemma you're seeing plenty. I agree that we should be trying to work to make our utilities more efficient. Energy cost is a large component for them, and so applaud your efforts on the energy side, and many of the utilities are working on that. When we, in the drinking water side, can give priority funding for some energy efficient aspects, for example.
Okay, any more questions? I think we're all set. Thank you very much for your presentations. We'll probably be getting some calls.
Just to mention, if it's all right with you, we can post the presentation on our website or a link to
I think I'm gonna add a couple things that got talked about today.
Sure.
Okay.
And we'll also make the video available on our YouTube channel.
And for the RPC folks, I won't be seeing you until next year. So Byron will be taking care of the meetings for next month, and have a Happy New Year. Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?